This Pokemon card looks completely harmless, but this isn't the artwork Japanese children originally saw. Across Pokemon's history, artwork has sometimes changed before cards reach the rest of the world. Sometimes the difference was tiny, sometimes an entire illustration disappeared. And the card we're hiding right now? We'll come back to it at number 1. These are 10 Pokemon cards that were censored, altered, or replaced, and the stories behind them. Number 10. Magmortar. This is the version released internationally. At first glance, there is nothing especially unusual about it, but compare it with the Japanese original and one detail immediately jumps out. Magmortar's arm cannon is pointed almost directly toward the person holding the card. For the international release, different artwork was used, with the cannon aimed away from the viewer. It's tempting to say that the weapon-like pose explains the change, but there's a problem with that story. No official reason has been confirmed. So the cannon is the obvious visual difference, but anything beyond that is speculation. The next two cards share a theme. Before Pokemon had to worry about how a cannon was pointed, the Game Corner created another localization problem, gambling. Number 9 is Card Flip Game. In the Japanese artwork, the machine sits inside a much more obvious Game Corner environment. The international composition pulls attention toward the machine itself and away from the surrounding casino-like setting. Number 8, Arcade Game, follows a similar pattern. The Japanese version makes the bank of gaming machines far more apparent, while the international release crops in and de-emphasizes that environment. Neither card needed a dramatic new character or a shocking replacement image. The change was mostly about context, what the viewer could see around the game. Number 7, Jynx. This change went beyond one card. Early Japanese depictions of Jynx showed the Pokemon with a black face. The character became controversial because of its resemblance to racist blackface imagery. Pokemon subsequently changed Jynx's face from black to purple. That redesign affected the character far beyond a single trading card. That's what makes this entry different from most of the others on this list. We're not simply looking at an altered background or a replacement illustration. We're looking at a Pokemon whose visual design itself was changed. Number 6, Sabrina's Gengar. At first, the international artwork looks perfectly normal. Gengar floats against a dark, eerie background, exactly the kind of setting you'd expect. But look at the Japanese original. Behind Gengar are grave markers, including crosses that make the cemetery setting much more explicit. In the international release, those details were removed. Gengar itself barely changes, the mood barely changes, but the religious imagery in the background disappears. It's a great example of how censorship doesn't necessarily mean replacing an entire illustration. Sometimes changing a few details completely alters what an image communicates. Number 5, Grimer. And this one needs some context. Look closely at Grimer's eyes in the Japanese artwork and then compare them with the international release. The position of the pupils changed. Over the years, fans have interpreted the original gaze as Grimer looking underneath the skirt of the girl standing nearby. But that interpretation shouldn't be confused with confirmed artistic intent. The artist has rejected the idea that this was what the illustration was meant to show. What we can say for certain is that the eye direction changed for the international version. And sometimes a tiny alteration can create one of the most talked about Pokemon cards of its era. Number 4, Moo Moo Milk. Now we're leaving subtle edits behind. The Japanese artwork depicts a Centret feeding directly from a Miltank's udder. For the international release, that illustration was not simply cropped or adjusted, it was replaced. The international card instead shows a much simpler image centered around the milk itself. Same card, same effect, completely different visual presentation. And the final 3 take that idea even further. Number 3, Sabrina's Gaze. Here's the international version. Sabrina stands with one hand extended toward the viewer. But that isn't the illustration Japanese players originally received. In the Japanese artwork, Sabrina's hand position can look very different when viewed outside its original cultural context. Rather than modify the fingers or slightly reposition the hand, the international release used completely different artwork. That's an important distinction. This wasn't simply an edit to the Japanese card. Players outside Japan effectively received another illustration altogether. Number 2, Koga's Ninja Trick. This is perhaps the best example on the list of why cultural context matters. Look carefully at the Japanese artwork and you'll see a symbol that many Western viewers immediately associate with Nazi Germany. But that's not what this symbol represents here. It is a manji, an ancient symbol used in Buddhism for centuries before the Nazis adopted a reversed and rotated swastika as their emblem. In Japan, the manji can appear on Buddhist temples and maps and carries a completely different historical and religious meaning. But put that image on a Pokémon card being sold internationally, and the potential for misunderstanding is obvious. So the international version removed the symbol. The card demonstrates something important about localization. Sometimes an image isn't changed because its original meaning is offensive. It's changed because its meaning can become completely different when it crosses cultures. And that brings us to number 1. Misty's Tears. Remember the card we hit at the beginning? This is the international version most players outside Japan saw. Misty is shown crying while Squirtle wipes away her tears. It's sweet, harmless artwork. But now it's time to remove the censor. This is the Japanese original. Instead of the illustration used internationally, the Japanese card depicts Misty nude with her arms and one leg positioned to cover her body. When the card was prepared for international release, that artwork wasn't edited. And there's one final point worth making. We often call cards like these banned Pokémon cards, but that's not quite the whole story. These weren't all cards that were banned from tournaments or prohibited from being played. What connects them is that their artwork was censored, altered, localized, or completely replaced as Pokémon moved between countries and cultures. And that might be more interesting than simply calling them banned, because every Pokémon card has a story, and sometimes the most interesting part is what changed along the way.